You're listening to When Love Comes, the podcast, a safe space for single women of faith on a journey of healing, growth, and preparing for the love you deserve. This resource was created with you in mind, so you'll be ready when love comes. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of When Love Comes, the podcast. I'm your host, April Allen. I am a divorce recovery and relationship coach, and I'm on this crazy mission to help people heal from the trauma of heartbreak, to create a life they love and prepare for the love that they deserve. So here's the thing, y'all. As a 3-time divorcee, one of the things that I knew for certain was that I knew nothing about healthy relationships. I could not identify them. I could not maintain them. I had no clue. So for 5 years, I have been on this journey, just immersing myself in relationships, trying to figure out, how do we do them well? Like what is a healthy relationship? And so because of that, I have created resources just like this one so that you and I are ready when love comes. So my guests today are some really, really, really good friends of mine that I am excited to talk to. It's something that we don't talk about. So I am in my late 40s, and one of the things that I have encountered in the dating world is people who have lost their spouse. And we don't talk enough about what does the healing process look like? What does falling in love again look like? What does a healthy relationship look like when you have gone through that level of trauma? And so I'm so excited to have my friends, the Burkhalters, with me today to talk about their journey to finding love. And let me tell y'all something. This is like the cutest couple ever, y'all. Like cutest, okay? If you ever see them out, see them on social media. And here's the thing. When we see pictures of people on social media and they're all lovey-dovey and kissy and all those things, those are the highlights. But let me tell y'all something. That is like real life for this couple, and I love it. So welcome to the podcast, James and Trina.
Thank you. Thank you.
So happy to have you guys here.
We're pleasure.
So I want to talk about this journey, right? Because like I said, we don't talk about it enough. And as we have people who are dating specifically later in life, it is something that keeps coming up. And I don't think we really know how to navigate the space. So I want to start with you, Trina. Okay. I want to talk about your journey, like your singlehood journey. I know I met you a few years ago and we've talked a little bit about the space that you were in before you met James.
Yeah.
But what did that look like in your single journey?
So my single journey actually started at the age of 48, which is when I learned to love me and like me. In that singleness, I remember saying yes to the Lord, for one, and not to sound so cliche, but it was my yes to volunteer and give my all to the Lord. But in that, while I was learning, I hated relationships. I would joke about James and say I couldn't stand people rubbing each other's back. Like it didn't even take all that. Like you're in a grocery store, for goodness sake. Honestly. And so I was in a hate mode, honestly. But in the process of saying yes to the Lord, so many things opened up. I learned who I was. I learned to like me finally. Like 48 and you're learning to love yourself. And so loving myself, I learned to learn to love the Lord. And that meant that I could love somebody else. And so I just started opening up. I do remember praying and I was having such a great time. I'm like, I can do this single thing by myself. My auntie had always been single. And I'm like, she did it. I can do it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I am fixing up my house, the bathrooms, like doing all the things. Right. And then I said, Lord, in my prayers, honestly, if you see fit. Yeah. If you see fit, because I'm ready to be single, like I'm going to do this thing. Just had got out of a really bad marriage. But I said, God, if you see fit to send me someone, because I have never been in love. I never loved anybody now that I understand. And I said, if you see fit, I asked for a specific age, like all the things, right? Realistically, he didn't have to be 6'3", all the ladies trying to get the tall guys. But I asked the Lord if he saw fit. I wanted to know what it was really like to be in love, because I have never been in love before. And so that's a little bit when the journey began for me.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love that you wanted to know what love is. You know, many times we think about people's journey in life. So I've been married 3 times. I've never been in love with those men. There was one man I think I was in love with, now that I understand love, maybe in my 20s, right?
Yeah.
But I had never been in love.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to jump back just a little bit.
Okay.
So you said you hated relationships. And I know that there are people listening that feel the same way.
Yeah.
But what got you to that place to where you were like, why are you even touching each other? Like, what got you to the place to where you could say, like, I hate this?
The place that I was in with my son's father, the place that I was in with my daughter's father, I gave 12 years of my life, from 16 to 27, waiting for an engagement ring, always being promised year after year, if you be good, I'll get you a ring. And I'm saying this, one time he said to me, if you drink this whole can of beer, we'll get married.
Wow.
And I did. And I did. And that didn't work out. So that's 12 years. And so now, fast forward, I'm 30. And I want to get married desperately. And so I had said that the first person I meet, I marry that person. And then I said, if they have a good job, I'll marry them. If they had a physique, because I was really into the buff bodies, like just all these stupid things, right? And so that's what happened. I married someone whom I didn't love. We didn't date. I didn't like him. That is so important. I didn't like him. But what he did have, he had a nice body. He was 13 years older than me. So I thought that that would look great because he looked really nice for his age, and he worked. He had a great job. And I'm like, so I'm in there, I'll be taken care of. And all that I had asked for, there was no love in there.
Yeah.
And then he was at church. Okay, we good.
Right. He checked all the boxes.
All the boxes. And so, especially like being in church, well, there's a story that goes along with that, but if we get there. And so that's what made me so angry, because none of those things worked out.
Right.
I waited and I struggled and I tried to be good for the Lord. And so like, I'm not getting anything I asked for. So at this point, I hate, because I am a good girl. I'm a great woman. I cook, I clean, I work out, I keep my body together, and I get nothing. So I'm angry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of women specifically that can relate to being in that space of I'm angry, because we seemingly have done all the right things, right? All the things that society tells us, and in many cases, all the things that our places of worship or our faith communities have told us, this is what you do, right? You marry a man who goes to church, because if he goes to church, he must be a good man.
Right,
you
right.
marry a man with a good job. You marry, all these different things. But I love how you could be transparent about the fact that, but I didn't love him and I wasn't loved. And I think we discount love in relationships. I know that I did. I went into many of my relationships not even questioning, should I even be loved, right? We check the boxes. You have a job. You're not beating on me, right? Like all these things, but we discount the power of having love. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So James, I've known you a little bit longer than Trina. And so I have watched your journey, been a part of your journey over the years. And so I want you to share with us what your journey looked like leading up to meeting Trina.
Wow. Well, there are several different versions of us meeting from Trina.
We'll get into that.
I have one version.
Okay.
She has more than one. So if we're out and about and we're with someone and they ask, well, how'd you guys meet? And I was like, well, this is your moment. You go ahead, go with your story. I'm fine with my version.
Right.
Anyway, we met at church. She says I sat in her seat.
I remember that.
Yeah. There are no assigned seats at church.
Depends on what church you go to. No, I'm kidding.
Except for Pastor Moore and Pastor Erica.
That's
are
it.
only 2 assigned seats. And I sent her a message on Messenger, and I was asking her out for coffee. And I didn't know Trina didn't drink coffee. I found this out afterwards, but she agreed to meet me.
Okay.
I was like, you don't like coffee? She's like, I can't stand the smell of it. I found this out afterwards. But anyway, coffee actually did not happen. Our first date actually happened on Thanksgiving.
Wow.
We went out for breakfast at First Watch in Chandler. And our first date was absolutely amazing. Because we wound up spending the entire day together.
Oh.
It wasn't planned that way, but we wound up spending the day together. And when she first got there at the restaurant, I asked her, I said, did you let anybody know you were here? And she was like, what? I was like, you're here with a stranger. Did you let your family know that you're here?
Yeah.
You know, I wanted her to let her family know, her daughter, mom, whoever, you know, that this is a safe space. I don't want you to be here with your guard up.
Yeah.
You know, as if, you know, well, what is he going to say? What is he going to do? Tell somebody. And she was impressed with that, you know, that I was concerned about her well-being. So from that Thanksgiving day, here we are a couple of years later. And I would have to say that it's been a very, very interesting, intriguing, and wonderful journey, all culminating to this time that we have right now.
I love it. So I just want to shout out your boldness, sir, for sliding into her DMs to take her on a coffee date. You know, people underestimate how someone asks you out. Like, we think it has to be this certain way, that I've got to approach you a certain way. But look, y'all, you might have a really great man trying to reach out to you and you just ignored him. So I want to take a step back, James.
Okay.
So I have, like I said, been a part of your journey, but I know that there was a story before Trina. And I want to talk about what that looked like for you. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about what healing looked like for both of you. So you had gone through, Trina, what I call the trauma of heartbreak. Heartbreak is a trauma. We've heard people say that someone died of a broken heart. That is very true because trauma affects every part of our body. And then, James, you also had a very traumatic experience as well. And so I want to talk about that season for you and what did you do to heal leading up to I've got the confidence and the excitement about now sliding into her DMs.
Okay. Well, I have to go back to when Yvonne and I met at FCC at church. We were both serving as ushers. We started dating in 2015, I think, and then we got married in 2017. Before we got married, I was made aware that she was dealing with cancer. I believe it was cervical cancer. And I think this was maybe about 6 months before we got married, somewhere in there. But none of the signs of dealing with cancer had taken effect. It wasn't until about maybe close to maybe 9 or 10 months that we were married when things started progressing. They were progressing quite fast. Yvonne and I were married less than 3 years, like 2 years and 8 months. And that whole challenge of being with someone, being their everything, while they're going through fighting for their life, it's difficult. But it's also a place where I did not have time to give to other people about being angry with somebody, being upset with somebody, because somebody was relying on me. So I just could not give my all to things. You know, if somebody said something wrong, it's like, whatever. If I needed to address something that I really didn't need to give my time to, you understand what I'm saying? You know, it's like, whatever, you know, I'll deal with you. You know, I have somebody else who is fighting for their life. And they're dependent on me 100%. The doctor visits, the hospital visits, the going back and forth to the hospitals and, you know, all those things, you know, it can weigh on you. And mind you, I am working and there are kids involved as well. I'm dealing with her family as well as mine, you know, just wearing a lot of hats at this time. So it was a challenge. But I believe that by, you know, my relationship with God is what helped me through it all, even after she passed away. And I made a decision that I would not be angry with God. And that is because God brought us through. And I also would say this to other people, that death is a part of life.
Yeah.
It's something we're all going to experience. It's not something that we want to experience, but we will have to experience. And I found peace in that many years ago, before I even met Yvonne. You know, knowing that one day that, you know, I won't be here, my mom, my dad, so on and so forth. You know, we'll have to deal with those things accordingly, and to not be afraid of that, because I think that's one of the things that we as people, we're instantly afraid of losing life. You know, but we don't know why we're afraid of it. You know, but God says that, you know, we're going to return to the dust. Yeah. Simple as that. So that was one of the things that I carried with me, and during the process of after, you know, Yvonne had passed away, that was tough because the whole world was quiet.
Yeah.
And this was around the time during COVID. So that was even more of a challenge for myself. The house was quiet. The world was quiet. Work had stopped for me. So I had to create a schedule for myself. I would intentionally go out and drive my car for at least an hour, wherever direction. Go there for an hour, come back. I would get on the internet. I would teach myself certain things because I wanted to learn about stocks and so on. You know, I would spend so much time doing that. So I had to plan out my new normal. Was it easy? No. I also seen how another gentleman who had lost his wife, how he dealt with that process, and he dealt with it publicly and very ugly. And I said, nope, I am not doing that. He's mad at the church. He's mad at the world. He's mad at certain people. He started a relationship with a woman and was putting all this on social media. And I was like, wow, that's painful. Yeah. You know, you're doing more harm than good to yourself. And that's not going to be my story. I'm not doing that. So I figured out that, you know, the best way to heal is to let time heal those things, you know, so on and so forth. And had many conversations with many people, male and female, you know, pastors, you know, and people who could give, you know, good, solid, sound advice. But the advice is only good if you take what someone is telling you. Right. You know, as Pastor Moore say, chew the hay and spit the sticks. You know, that's me. It's like, well, what works for me? Because everything doesn't work for everybody. Right. So I had to make sure that what works for me, and that was standing to my word, you know, praying, talking to God, and asking God for direction, opposed to me going off the rails, if you will, and assuming that, hey, what I'm doing is right, without asking someone else. Like, well, how do you feel if I do so-and-so? You know, opposed to just taking things in my own hands, like, okay, well, I'm going to move to Kentucky and I'm going to go work for the railroad. And somebody be like, what? Why? Right. You know, so those are some of the things that I had to address, you know, for me, because I think everybody wants to be healed and be whole to move on to their next. But you never know what that looks like until a situation arises that may trigger something in you, you know. So can you address every situation leading up to your next? Not by yourself, you can't. You can give yourself good sound advice while you by yourself. Right. But, you know, until that other person comes into your life and a certain situation reveals itself, you don't know how you're going to react. Absolutely. So there is no one say all, do all, be all answer, you know, for healing, you know, after someone has passed away.
Thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I just truly believe in is having a community when you're going through a healing process. And that could be spiritual advisors, that could be family and friends, that could be professionals, coaches, therapists, but having a community of people that can walk through this situation with you. Like you said, give you sound advice, because some of the best and craziest conversations I've ever had are with myself, right? Those like, well, I'm just going to pick up and move to Kentucky. And like, wait, what? Right. Kentucky? Exactly. And so I think that is so powerful for you to say that, you know, you continue to reach out to people for help. And I remember that other situation that was very public. And we were all kind of watching like, wait a minute, like, hold on, this isn't the way to do this. But, people act out of pain. And to your point, there's no one specifically in this situation that really tells you how to act, right? And then we all say, well, this is what I would do, but we don't really know unless we're in that situation.
Exactly.
So with you, James, when was that moment, or was there a moment that you said, I'm ready to open my heart again?
Well, I talked to God about it first. So I used to go jogging. I still do, early in the morning. So that's my time with God. I talk to God. So I asked God, about dating, am I ready? So on and so forth. But let me go back a little bit. So maybe a few months before Yvonne passed away, we had a conversation. And she said, I want to talk to you about something that's serious. And I'm sitting here like, what are you talking about? And she says, I want you to remarry. She said, I want you to do that. I was like, well, you want to talk about that right now?
Right.
I was like, really? She's like, you're too young. You don't need to be alone. You need to remarry. I'm perfectly fine with you remarrying. And, for me, I'm sitting here, I'm speechless, and I'm like, okay. She's like, well, you have to give me your word that you're going to remarry.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, all right, yeah. And she actually told someone else that to hold me accountable to this. And the goal was at the time to be married within a year.
Oh, wow.
After, she said married or dating, within a year after she had passed away. And the person who she held accountable was definitely 100% on the job. And I'm like, okay, but she's asking me about certain women who I had zero interest in. I was like, no. So, in talking to God and asking God for guidance and direction, I said to God that these are certain things that I desire to have in a wife. She had to be a woman of God. She had to be very attractive. I was not dealing with any children. It's a short list, maybe 5 things. Very short list. I was like, okay. So interesting enough, I'm saying in my mind, well, what about this person? What about this person? What about this person? Now, this is in my prayer, and I'm talking to God. When I tell you God has a sense of humor, because he was laughing. He was like, what? Is that who you had in mind? Like, you got to be kidding me.
Wow.
So I was like, wow, So moving forward, I would have to say that I asked God to just reveal her to me.
Yeah.
And it happened that he did reveal Trina to me, and it was her hair. Because there was no other woman there with hair like hers as well as mine.
I remember. I think your hair was short then, wasn't it?
When I first came to FCC, it was very
it
short.
was short. I remember.
Yeah. Now, actually, I had never seen Trina during those times when she had short hair.
I had never seen James in all the times that I have been there as an usher. Never saw.
What?
Never.
And when I happened to, I noticed her, but I didn't say anything to her. I didn't approach her. And I had no idea she sat in this said seat. I happened to be sitting in this seat to get away from somebody else who assumed.
Keep it real.
Right.
Keep it real.
They assumed. So I was like, where's the exit? It's on the other side of the church. So I went and sat over here. Unbeknownst to me, she comes in. I'm like, oh, okay. And she's like, oh, I usually sit here, this, that, and the other. I'm like, you can have a seat, not a problem. And basically, it started from there about a seat. But my heart was open to receive about pursuing Trina and having a relationship. Because, well, first of all, I knew I was going to remarry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know how soon, how long it would have taken, Those things I did not know. But I did know that I did want to be married again. I did not have a timeline.
Yeah.
I didn't say 1 year, 2 years, 7 years. I didn't. I knew I wanted to be remarried before I turned 60. I didn't know that much. And I think you and I had a conversation. I was saying to you, if I remember correctly, because we met when I was
You was about to turn 55.
55.
Yeah,
and
the next, in a couple, well, the next day almost.
I don't
Couple
think it was
days.
that
Couple
next
days.
day.
Thanksgiving happened, and then your birthday was, I think, a week later,
Right.
and you were 56.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I didn't want to prolong it, but I also didn't want to rush it.
Right.
Either, you know, because
Right.
I'm like, rushing something is, it can backfire immediately.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
So basically, that's how things started between Trina and I.
Woo! I love it. And let me tell y'all something. If you are not watching the video, I'm going to let y'all know that they've been holding hands for the last 10 minutes, and I love it. So go and watch the video. If you're just listening, go watch the video so you can see this. So I want to just talk about something that that happened in your relationship that I think doesn't happen enough is we don't talk enough about death and what happens after with our significant other or with our spouse. And one thing that I've heard as I've started to do this work and talk to more people who have found love after loss is that I have found that it gives a sense of peace when you've had that conversation. And it's one of those conversations that, it's not fun, it's not pretty, but to your point, James, death is a part of life and you just don't know. And so I have found that the people who've had that conversation or their spouses have initiated that conversation, there is a different level of peace about remarrying or about getting into another relationship because it's like we've understood, we've talked about this, right? So I love that she did that, even though you were like, I'm not trying to talk about this right now, but I think it's important that we have that conversation. So now I want to fast forward.
Okay.
So we have had the coffee date, slid into her DMs, Thanksgiving has happened. So now you guys are dating. And so Trina, I want you to share with us just what that season felt like, looked like for you, because you're coming from a place of, I hate relationships, to now my heart is open. Now I am getting to know this man who sat in my seat. And that's a story I'm sticking with, James. I'm going to be honest with you. So I'm sticking with that story.
Go for it.
What was coming up inside of you during this season?
I was scared. He asked God to reveal his wife, and I'm asking God if he see fits to give me a husband, but I'm also saying to hide me because I didn't want to be looked at in the church as one of those women that were thirsty or whatever the case was, right? I'm coming to churches to praise God. I definitely showed interest at least 10 days later after he slid into my DMs. Like, I do have my own story. He DM'd me on November the 4th. And so now I'm made aware of him, and I now begin to see him. And I actually thought James was married because he would often open the car door for this woman. And I was like to myself one day, I was like, oh, I don't like the couples that be arguing on their way to church and then you want to be all nice. Come to find out, it's my sister-in-law, Janice. So a lot of little crazy things were happening. And so just as the journey began and he took the initiative to look me up based on the conversation that we had, James was very intentional and very serious. And in my mind, because I had played so many games before, I'm like, whatever, I'll go along with this, right? But he was very intentional. So we had our first date on Thanksgiving. We did a hike, and then we did his birthday. And in those few days, James was very intentional to say, on Thanksgiving, we went for a walk, and I was like, oh my God, I was so excited. Like, I love doing all this, a little romantic walk after dinner. He said he's not dating just to be dating. In my mind, I'm still like, okay, whatever.
Right.
I've heard that before too, but he was very serious. So the second day we talked on the phone, at least in one of these 5 days, he said, I plan to make you my wife within a year. Oh. And I heard that, but I was like, yeah, I heard that before. Remember, I waited 12 years, right? So like for me, who cares? But he kept showing me how serious he was. So for me, it's like, oh, girl, you better catch up because you're going to lose out, right? And so he was very intentional. And all of a sudden, it's like, my life changed, and now I'm intentional, and now I don't want to waste my time dating either. And when I say that love happened quickly, it did. I said James was definitely in love with me on day one, because before we left breakfast, we were holding hands. Things were just happening like unreal.
Yeah.
And it was so comfortable, and I didn't stop it. While we were having Thanksgiving dinner and waiting at the friend's house, I found myself rubbing his back.
No.
The unspeakable.
The unspeakable.
But everything felt so natural. And the first time, like, I was falling in love, and I was falling in love quickly. And so you play that game. Who's going to say it first, right? I wound up saying it first because I told him that I really, 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 really like you. Figure it out, right? We had a lot of tough conversations. Yeah. We talked on the phone intentionally, and we were just in the same place at the same time. So it just happened like overnight, because I think both of our hearts were ready for this. We were both intentional, and that is our word today. Being very intentional about our relationship. We have vowed that we would be newlyweds forever.
I love it.
Forever.
I love it. So I love how your face lights up, Trina. You know, you guys you couldn't imagine, I couldn't imagine you being that person. And I knew you then, or was starting to get to know you then. I remember seeing you then in that season of like, I hate relationships. Like, I remember seeing you periodically and being like, oh, who's that? I really like her hair. So apparently her hair was what it was. So, so I just love how excited you get even now being married and, you know, being a few years in. Like, I love it. So James, same thing with you. So you're now starting this new relationship. And I think it's easy sometimes when we take that first step, because it's like, that's the scary step. But we don't know what's going to come with it. So during your dating season with Trina, was there anything that came up within you that was like, oh man, I don't know that I'm ready, or what, did anything come up with you in that season that made you even question, like, am I on the right path?
Well, I didn't have any doubts. I didn't have any reservations. But I guess with any dating situation that we have to know ourselves first.
Yes.
You know, and having a relationship with God is number one with me. As I even told Trina that, it's like, well, you know, if you don't love God more than you love me, then I'm on the first thing smoking.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm just not interested, because I know that's my life and that's my story, and I want that to be a part of our story. So I think that's the first step, you know, having a relationship with God, a good relationship, not a substandard relationship with God, only relying on God or talking to God when things are good.
Right.
You know, those tough times and tough conversations that we've had, you know, they meant a lot. And I think those are the things that people stray away from. So when we started marriage counseling, and we were told that this was like the easiest couple to counsel, who our counselors were, because we had all the conversations already.
Yeah.
You know, and we still continue to have those conversations. Are they great? Nope, not all the time. Yeah. Sometimes they make your throat a little dry, you know. But it's, you know, my thing is we should not be so quick to sugarcoat things. Yeah. And get the world out of your business. You know, when people want to post all their business on social media and start asking for advice from strangers, it's like, are you serious right now? Who cares what a stranger thinks? What about the person that you're dating?
Yes.
That's who you need to be having a conversation with, you know, and people who are well versed in how to make sure that your marriage stays together. Because our marriage is not a secret. I don't want it to be secret. I want the world to know, you know, how much I love my wife and continue to date my wife on a daily basis. We're doing things together all the time. And I think that's one of the things that people tend to want to impress social media opposed to
Right.
oppressing the person that's next to them, because this person is going to be with me for life.
Yeah.
Social media can come and go,
Yeah.
you know. So if we're letting social media lead our lives and not God be in front, there's a problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to ask you, and either one of you can answer without divulging too much information, but you said something that I think is very key in relationships that we miss to our detriment. Having tough conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And having those conversations that, like you said, might make your throat dry, might make you question your relationship, might make you question yourself. But what was maybe some of the topics that you guys had to talk about in this season that might have been tough?
Well, I would have to say one of the tough conversations is Trina and I, first of all, we don't have any children together, but we have children, adult children, who don't live with us. And there was a conversation that came up that we immediately agreed on. It was about money. You know, it was about if kids, you know, call and want money, you know, for me, it's like, that's a no. Nope.
Hard pass.
It's, it's like no. And she, you know, but it came up, I believe, from her. And she was like, well, what if one of the kids, you know, call and they say they need this, that, and the other? I said, well, there's a series of questions that's going to happen. But those things, no money is going to be passed without me talking to her first. That has to happen. That's very necessary. That shows trust, you know, and it shows that you believe in her, she believes in you, you know, and you're not going to do something outside the marriage without her knowing. And I think some people think, well, you know, oh, it's not a big thing. It's $10 here, $20 there, $50
that
here.
adds up.
It was like, no, I'm not doing that. So that was one of the conversations that we had early on.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and both of us agreed immediately. It's like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
The finances are a big deal for me. I like to be in control. I know I said that word out loud. I do. And he was willing to give it up, right? And he's like, you can have my paycheck. Great. You know, and I'm not one of those wives that's like, we were watching Everybody Hates Chris yesterday, and she's paying half the bills, right?
Yeah.
I'm not that person. I do need to be in control of our money because I want to take care of us. So that was one of the big things. And again, it was a very easy yes. You can have the paychecks. I trust you with our money and so forth. So the finances and the kids, that was a big thing because those things can, especially if you blend a family, those things can tear up a marriage if you open that door.
Yeah, but also you want to have peace in your home.
Yes.
You know, I don't want to be the type of person, well, you know, I'm only going to give you this amount of money to take care of these things, and that's it, and I'm going to hoard the rest. No, that's a no. I want peace in my home forever, not just for a moment, but for a lifetime.
Yes.
And I think when people start using that analogy of mine, it's my money. It's not your money.
Yeah.
God made you a manager over the money.
I love it.
It's God's money.
I love
It's
it.
not yours. It's not mine. We
Yeah.
get to manage it, but we need to manage it accordingly.
Amen.
You know,
Yeah.
Trina wanted to do the book, so on and so forth. Go for it. Knock yourself out.
Right? But I think that's a good conversation because in society, I think that there are these norms that are portrayed, right?
Assume norms.
Assume norms, right? That like the man is supposed to, the woman is supposed to. And I grew up in a household where I saw my parents do varying things, right? My dad worked, my mom worked sometimes she was stay-at-home mom. But I saw them both cook. I saw them both do laundry, you know, things like that. And so I do think that there is wisdom in that season of dating to ask yourselves, what does our relationship look like? For me, my second marriage was a disaster financially because we were under that assumption, right? That like the man takes care of the finances. And to be honest, he just wasn't that good at finances. And so I ended up, when I got divorced, having to file bankruptcy because of the financial situation we were in. And so I'm just this advocate for having those tough conversations before we get married and building a relationship that is healthy for the couple,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily what we're supposed to do, but what works for us.
Yeah.
And so, Trina, I know we'll talk a little bit about, going into business and things like that. You're great with money, right? So, and then James, you were like, look, I trust you. Here's the paycheck. Do what we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to talk about, and Trina, you and I have had these conversations just about some of the things, particularly as a woman, going into this relationship with the knowledge that he has had a love that he lost. I dated a widower for a period of time, and I'll tell you, I was not ready because I had dated people who had been divorced. I had dated people who had never married, but I had never dated someone who had had this wonderful marriage. I had dated people who had terrible marriages. And so you go into it kind of thinking to yourself, man, I'm starting out on top because, you don't even like this other person.
Right. Right.
But now going into a relationship with someone where they've had a taste of love, they've had a taste of a good relationship. How did you feel going into that? And was there any insecurities even within yourself that came up? And how did you guys deal with those?
Initially, dating James and learning that he had lost his first wife, I really was cool about it because, again, I didn't think it was going to go too far anyway. But as we proceeded to get serious, somewhere along the lines, some insecurities did kick in. And he was very open to say, if you have any questions, you can ask me. And I wanted to ask questions. I did ask some questions, but I didn't want to ask too many questions because I get in my own head. As you said, he lost her. It wasn't like they broke up. I hate your guts. And I'm coming in like polished, right? So sometimes I always think that I'm second.
Yeah.
I've never been first with anybody ever in my life. And I feel like I've always been fighting for that as a daughter, in other relationships. And so James definitely has respect for me. And I'll never know what that was like. But for Trina, it's always something going on with Trina where I feel like I'm not enough. And the security is definitely there. But initially, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it's completely there in 2 years. I'm still fighting to understand who am I and where do I fit. They didn't break up. They didn't divorce.
Right.
He lost her. Am I the love of your life? Do you love me this much? And it sounds so kiddyish. You're 52 and this is how you feel. I do, and it's a real thing. It's a real thing when you date someone that has lost, their wife. But I can assure you that in 2 years that the door is open if we want to talk about something. And at this point where we are, I don't want to talk about it because real talk is like, I want this to be about us now.
Right.
We had our time to deal with that. And every time I had something to say, I said, no disrespect. Because I don't want to just, respect him in any kind of way. But I still want to know that I am first, that now this is about us and that I'm not trying to. James would say to me, as if you're trying to be in competition with someone.
Right.
So this is real talk. And I didn't look at it like that, but Trina is always in competition with Trina. So it's just been very difficult in the beginning to understand where I fit, to understand that he loves me and that he's not thinking about who he lost, that sometimes, when we have quiet moments and he's looking in my eyes, I'm like, is he saying me?
Right.
And I'm saying these things because they're real.
Yeah.
They're real. And if you don't talk about it, then you get all twisted up. And when I share these things with him, oh my God, he assured me this one time that I'm just that person, that I'm everything that he asked God for. And so I can rest in that security right now. And as we progress in our marriage and all the things being intentional, I know that James loves me. There's no doubt.
Yeah, that's
No doubt.
awesome. Thank you for your transparency that is the part that I don't think we talk about enough is what does real life look like? I know for me, when I was in that relationship, I think one time I went to say something along the lines of, I'm the best thing that ever happened to you. And then I caught myself because I'm like, well, maybe I'm not the best thing that ever happened to you.
Right.
So those insecurities are real. And there's no one to really tell us how we're supposed to feel in those situations. And so, James, I'll ask you, because as Trina said, you've been a safe place. And I think that's huge for her to come to you and say, I'm feeling second. You know, I'm not feeling like I'm number one. You know, what are some of the things that you did or said to be intentional about giving her that peace and that security of being your wife?
Well, I have to allow Trina to ask the questions. And Trina's got a lot of questions.
I do.
Sometimes I have to say, okay, we need to pause on the questions.
Right.
You're going to have to give me a week or two to catch up to answer all these questions. And I don't want to be insensitive to the way she feels or anything. I allow her to ask the questions, and I answer the questions accordingly, and make sure that, you know, it's always a safe space for her. Because I don't want her to feel uncomfortable, you know, and not be able to ask a question. And I definitely don't want our marriage to seem like it's not working based on my my wife passing away.
Right.
I cannot base my current relationship on a past relationship. That is not, it's just not possible. I'm not asking Trina to be Yvonne. I'm not asking her to act like her, think like her, dress like her. I don't, because that part of my life is over.
Right.
And I have to now address what is currently before me, which is my wife.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Oh, I just love her face. I'm telling y'all, go watch the video if you haven't, because y'all have to see these two. So, James, I'll ask you the same question. As you're progressing through your dating season, as you are progressing now into this new marriage, was there anything for you that may have come up that may have been unexpected as you're now married to a new person?
Anything that I could think of right off the top of my head? Now, I will share this part. I knew Trina was upset with her ex-husband. And a lot of those things came about, you know, during our dating and early in our marriage. And I pointed those things out to her. And she actually took a step back and was like, oh, you're right. I was like, you're still angry with this person about something that happened some time ago. I will not take the punishment for that person. I'm not going to be punished for something that someone else did.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be held accountable for it. I'm not going to stand for it. I will not be treated in such a manner. And I told her that, and she kind of looked at me like, okay, it has really hit the fan this time.
Right.
And that's part of those real conversations, those tough conversations, because we don't want those things to progress into something else,
Right.
you know, where we're, you know, at odds with one another without really addressing the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
You know, so it needed to be said. It was unexpected, but I had to point it out to her, just as she has pointed out things to me, you know, about my past. You know, it's like, well, you do certain things, you know, you say certain things, you know, and if your spouse isn't allowed to say certain things and it's walking on eggshells, well, what kind of marriage is that going to be?
Absolutely.
You know, you're faking the funk, basically.
Right.
That's what you're doing. You know, it's
You
like,
are.
well, you don't want to live like that. I don't want to live like that. And I've always told Trina that, you know, if nowhere else that I have peace, I'm going to have peace at home.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
He says it
100%
all
of the time. We're not walking around here not speaking to each other. You on the couch, I'm in the bed, or whatever the case may be. It's like, no, it's not going to happen here.
Right.
Outside of here, maybe, but not here, not where we sleep at.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. So
I love
let's have peace at home.
Absolutely. I mean, my house has to be a house of peace. That is a non-negotiable.
Absolutely.
For me,
Exactly.
that is my sanctuary. That is a place that
That
I
part.
get away from the world and refuel myself. Like, it's got to be a place of peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we close, I want to first say thank you again for your
Absolutely.
transparency, for being my guest. You guys are wonderful friends. And so I love that you were willing to share your story with me and the entire world. So as we close, I'll just ask each of you. So Trina, what would you say to the woman or the man, the person who might be listening and they're in that space of, I hate relationships. I don't want to see people holding hands at the grocery store.
That'll be us right now.
Right. What would you say to that person?
Actually, I would say, it sounds so cliche, but you have to wait. You have to get to know God. This was for me, and if it worked for someone else, you really need to have a relationship with God. I personally now, at the age that I am, with all the times of trying to be with the Lord, just wait for him and really be in his word. I promise you, God is the best matchmaker ever. I could have not picked a better husband. I mean, we do everything together. So wait. Have your list. Be realistic about the list, right? And just allow God to heal your heart. And the other thing is, if you don't love yourself, you cannot give love to anybody else. Again,
Don't get
sounds
married.
so cliche,
Yeah.
but it's so true. It's so true. So,
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I am an advocate for self-love. That is something that I struggled with for most of my life. And I realize now, at the wise old age of almost 48 at the time of this recording, that a big reason why I entered into the relationships and the marriages that I didn't love myself. I didn't. And to be honest, choosing those relationships was a form of abuse. It was a form of self-sabotage because I did not love myself. And so that's so huge. So James, I would ask you, for the person that's listening that may have lost a spouse and they might be in that space of, not sure about love again, not sure if they deserve love again, just not sure about that future. What would you tell that person?
Well, everybody deserves love. God loves us. Should be our first love. If someone is thinking about dating, first I would have to say you have to love yourself first of all. Secondly, know that you know that you know that you know that this is something you're ready to jump into, and not jump into and be half-hearted about it.
Right.
You want to be in a fully committed relationship, in a marriage. I would say stop acting on emotions, because a lot of us do that. It's like, oh, that person is beautiful right there, and you're just jumping in. It's like, well, what's underneath that? Figure out that person as well as yourself, before you decide to say I do to someone. Because if you haven't, well, let me go back. You're probably not going to address each and every situation before you get married.
Right.
It's impossible. But the things that you need to work on yourself personally and who you want to have in your life, make sure that you're saying to this person that they're checking all the boxes that you want, and vice versa. You can't ask someone to be a 10 if you're an 8.
Come on.
Okay? It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
And having a relationship with God, and I can't express that enough, that has to be number one.
Yeah.
Having a relationship with God, having a good church, a good foundation with a church home, those things should be first, and making sure that you know that this is the one for you. Right. That you know that this person is for you. Right, absolutely.
I love it. Well, thank you again for being my guest. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank
you for having us. We appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, y'all. So that was another episode. This is probably one of my favorites, but don't tell my other guests that. But no, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it is a powerful and much needed conversation. So if you guys are listening and you're like, April, what do we do now? I want you guys to go to whenlovecomes.com. There's a ton of resources over there. There's a relationship coaching community over there. So if you're someone who says, I love this episode, I'm on my healing journey, I need a little bit more support, that's a great place for you guys to start. You can also find the previous podcast episodes and some freebies. So go to When Love Comes and make sure you guys download what you need, get the resources that you need so that you're ready when love finds you.